I still remember the exact weight of him. Not the abstract idea of a baby, not the number on a birth certificate, but the precise, terrifying heaviness of a human being who had been inside my body for 9 months and was now, finally, in my arms. He was warm. He was wet. He was screaming with the outraged indignation of someone who had just discovered that the world was cold and bright and unfair. I counted his fingers without thinking. 10, perfect, miniature, and I pressed my lips to his forehead and whispered a name I had been forbidden to say out loud. Leo, my Leo, the only part of me they had not managed to take yet. That was the last time I held him. 40 minutes later, a nurse who would not meet my eyes took him from my arms and handed him to my sister. The cameras were already rolling. The lights were already hot. And Celeste, my beautiful, famous, ferocious sister, cradled the child I had birthed against the fake bump she had worn for 9 months, smiled into the lens of a television camera, and told 3 million viewers that she had never believed in miracles until she became a mother. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, my name is Iris, and what I'm about to tell you is a story about the body they borrowed, and the child they stole, and the decade I spent learning how to become visible again. If you've ever given someone everything you had, your blood, your bones, your future, and watched them turn it into a ratings spike before they lock the door, stay with me. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and listen until the end. Because this story doesn't end with a courtroom. It ends with a sunset and a question, and the first real breath I've taken in 10 years. Here's my story. I was 25 when my sister asked me to disappear inside my own body. Celeste was 30, and she was already the queen of morning television. Her show, Celeste, was the kind of program that housewives watched with coffee and students watched with hangovers, a glossy hour of celebrity interviews, cooking segments, and the kind of performed vulnerability that made audiences feel like they were her best friend. She cried on camera when she interviewed cancer survivors. She laughed with her whole body when a toddler danced on set. She was America's older sister, and her image was worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. I was her actual sister, and I was worth exactly what they decided I was worth. The meeting happened at her penthouse, the one with the view of Central Park that she had earned by telling other people's stories with enough empathy to make them her own. Marcus was there, her husband, her producer, the man who had turned her charisma into a brand. My parents were there too, flown in from Ohio, sitting on the white leather sofa like they were afraid to leave fingerprints. And I was there, in jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, holding a cup of tea I hadn't asked for. Celeste took my hands. Her nails were perfect, pale pink, the color of innocence. Iris, she said, her voice dropping into the register she used for confessional segments. I need you. We need you. She told me about her body. About the endometriosis that had ravaged her uterus, the surgeries that had left her unable to carry a child, the grief that she had hidden from the public because the show needs me to be strong. She told me about Marcus, about his desire for a biological child, about the way their marriage was cracking under the pressure of her infertility. She told me about the ratings drop that had happened when a tabloid ran a story about her failure to conceive, and how the network was questioning whether a childless woman could really connect with the modern mom demographic. And then she told me the plan. You're young, she said. You're healthy, your family, we want you to be our surrogate. I laughed. I actually laughed because the idea was so absurd it felt like a sketch from her show. Celeste, I'm in grad school. I have loans, We'll pay your loans, Marcus interrupted. He was wearing a sweater that cost more than my rent, and he spoke with the calm authority of a man who had never been told no. All of them. We'll buy you an apartment in Manhattan. You'll be the baby's godmother. You'll be in our lives forever, Iris. This isn't a transaction, it's family. My mother leaned forward. She had the same eyes as Celeste, bright and calculating, but without the polish. Your sister built this career from nothing. She gave us everything. Now she needs you to give her this one thing. Don't you think you owe her? I looked at my father. He was staring at his shoes. He had been staring at his shoes for as long as I could remember, especially when the women in his life were making decisions that would destroy someone. I need to think about it, I said. You have until Friday, Celeste said, her smile still in place. The segment airs in 3 weeks. We need to start fertility treatments immediately if we're going to announce the pregnancy live. The segment. It was always about the segment. I said yes on Thursday, not because I wanted to, not because I believed them. I said yes because I was 25, because I was drowning in debt, because my sister had been the sun my entire family orbited, and I was tired of being the dark matter no one could see. I told myself it was an act of love. I told myself it would make me part of something. I told myself that carrying my nephew, because that was how they framed it, my nephew, not my son, would be the most meaningful thing I ever did. I was right about one thing. It was the most meaningful thing I ever did. I just didn't understand the meaning until it was too late. The fertility clinic was a palace of glass and silence. They harvested my eggs, not Celeste's, because her body couldn't produce anything viable, and fertilized them with Marcus's sperm. One embryo took. One heartbeat flickered into existence on a screen that I stared at alone, because Celeste was filming a Thanksgiving special and Marcus was in a meeting with the network. I documented everything, not for them, for me. A leather journal, the kind I had kept since I was 12, filled with the things I couldn't say out loud. The morning sickness that hit me like a truck at week 6. The way my body changed, became round and heavy and alien, a vessel that belonged to me but was being rented out by people who never asked what I wanted. The first kick, which happened at 2:00 a.m. while I was lying on my futon in my studio apartment, and which made me cry so hard I thought I would break in half. Celeste, meanwhile, was performing pregnancy. She bought a prosthetic belly, the kind actors use in movies, and she wore it under designer dresses on her show. She did segments about our fertility journey, crying real tears as she described the injections, the hope, the heartbreak. She never mentioned me. I was the ghost in the machine, the biological fact that didn't fit the narrative. When she did refer to me, it was as her incredibly supportive sister who is helping us behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, where no one could see me, where no one could ask questions. The baby shower was televised. It was a spectacle of pink and white, held in a ballroom that smelled like roses and money. I was invited, but I was seated at a table in the back, behind the cameras, wearing a dress Celeste's stylist had chosen that was 2 sizes too big. When she introduced me to the audience, it was as my little sister, the aspiring academic who was just so excited to be an aunt. The audience applauded. I smiled. My hands were resting on my actual belly, 7 months round, and no one looked at it. No one looked at me. Marcus found me by the dessert table. He put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed. "You're doing great," he said. "The network loves the footage. We're getting Emmy buzz for the fertility series." I looked at him. I'm throwing up 3 times a day. My back feels like it's breaking, and I can't afford to stop working, so I'm grading papers between naps. His smile flickered. "We'll take care of you after the birth, once things settle." Things never settled, they just shifted into a new phase of exploitation. The birth was scheduled like a season finale. Celeste wanted a natural delivery on camera, of course, for the raw authenticity of the moment, but my body had other plans. My water broke at 3:00 a.m. 3 weeks early while I was alone in my apartment. I called Marcus. He didn't answer. I called Celeste. She sent her assistant. The assistant drove me to a private hospital where the staff had signed NDAs and the delivery room had been fitted with lighting rigs. I was in labor for 14 hours. No epidural at first. Celeste wanted the full experience for the footage, and since she was pretending to be in labor, I had to actually feel it. By hour 10, I was screaming. By hour 12, I was begging. By hour 14, Leo was born, and for 40 minutes, before the cameras were fully set up, before the stylist had finished prepping Celeste's face, before the director gave the cue, he was mine. I held him. I counted his fingers. I whispered his name, and then they took him. The segment that aired 3 days later was called The Miracle of Leo. It showed Celeste in a hospital gown, her prosthetic belly artfully removed, holding a newborn with tears streaming down her face. It showed Marcus kissing her forehead, the two of them laughing through their joy, the doctors congratulating the new mother. It showed my parents in the waiting room, dabbing their eyes, talking about how proud they were. I was not in the segment. I was in a recovery room down the hall, stitches in my body and milk in my breasts, and a silence in my chest that felt like death. 2 weeks after the birth, the letter came. It was from Marcus's attorney. It stated that I had signed a document surrendering all parental rights, that I was prohibited from contacting the child or the family, and that any attempt to do so would result in legal action for harassment. I read it 3 times. I didn't remember signing anything like that. But then I remembered, the night before the birth in the hospital, when Marcus had rushed in with a clipboard and said it was standard surrogacy paperwork, just a formality, sign here so we can process the birth certificate. I had been exhausted. I had been drugged. I had trusted my family. I called Celeste. She didn't answer. I called my mother. She said, "You knew the terms, Iris. Don't make this ugly." I called Marcus. His assistant said he was in a meeting and would get back to me. He never did. I showed up at the studio. Security escorted me out. I showed up at the penthouse. The doorman wouldn't let me up. I sent letters. I sent emails. I sent photos of the journal, of the pregnancy, of the moments that proved Leo was more than a nephew to me. Celeste responded the way she responded to all crises. She weaponized her platform. On her show, she did a segment about setting boundaries with toxic family. She didn't name me, but she didn't need to. She described a deeply troubled sibling who became obsessed with our child, who tried to insert herself into our family in unhealthy ways, who needed professional help. Audience booed the unnamed villain. The comments section filled with people speculating about my mental health, my jealousy, my obvious desire to ruin a happy family. I lost my grad school fellowship. The university didn't want the association. I lost my apartment. I couldn't afford it without the promised payment, which never came. I lost my friends, who drifted away when the tabloids started running stories about Celeste's stalker sister. I lost my name, my face, my history. I became a footnote in someone else's success story. The crazy aunt, the cautionary tale, the surrogate they forgot to pay. I spent the next 10 years rebuilding a life from whatever scraps were left. I finished my degree at night, working as a paralegal during the day. I found a studio apartment in Queens that smelled like curry from the restaurant downstairs and mold from the bathroom ceiling. I learned to sleep through the night without waking up with my arms curved around an empty space. I learned to see babies in strollers without flinching. I learned to be Iris again, not the womb, not the ghost, not the cautionary tale. And then, 2 years ago, I found the document. I was working late at the family law firm where I had finally landed a permanent position, filing old cases that no one else wanted to touch. A folder fell from a shelf. Inside was a copy of the surrender I had signed at the hospital, the one that had erased me from Leo's life. But something was wrong. The notary stamp was smudged, almost illegible, and the name matched a notary whose license had expired 6 months before the date on the document. I checked the state database. I checked again. The notary had been operating illegally. The document was void. I sat in that file room for an hour, the papers shaking in my hands. I had a legal opening. I had proof that the agreement that had destroyed me was a fraud. I could sue. I could fight for custody. I could finally tell the truth. But I was 33, and I had spent a decade learning how the law works for people like Celeste. She had the best entertainment lawyers in the country. She had a network that would bury me in litigation until I was bankrupt again. She had a public that loved her more than they loved justice. If I went to court, I would lose. Not because I was wrong, but because I was poor, and in this country, poor is the same as invisible. So I chose a different court. The one Celeste had built herself. The court of public opinion. The court where she was queen, and where a queen can be toppled if you strike at the exact right moment. I spent 6 months learning everything about Marcus. He and Celeste were divorcing. The tabloids had the story, but the details were buried under NDAs and mutual PR strategies. Marcus was trying to rebrand. He wanted to be seen as the wounded father, the devoted dad, the man who had sacrificed his marriage for his son. He needed an image consultant, someone who could help him navigate the single-father narrative without making him look like the cheater the rumors said he was. I applied for the job. I used a different name, a different hair color, a resume that emphasized my legal background and my discretion. I got the interview. I got the job. Working for Marcus was like being invited into the room where your own autopsy was performed. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? I was 33 now, not 25. I wore glasses I didn't need, spoke in a voice an octave lower, dressed in the sharp, anonymous professionalism of a woman who existed to make other people look good. I was Mara, the image consultant. I was invisible again, but this time, invisibility was my weapon. He talked to me about Celeste. Constantly. In our strategy sessions, in our late-night phone calls, in the car rides to events where he needed to be seen as sympathetic, he called her the performer. He said she had been playing a role since the day we met. He told me about the fake pregnancy, the prosthetic belly, the way she had insisted on owning the narrative, even when it meant erasing the person who had actually carried the child. Did you ever feel like something was off? I asked him once in his office, my voice casual, my recorder hidden in my pen. He laughed, a bitter sound. Off, Iris, everything was off, but the ratings were good. The sponsors were happy. And Leo was the only real thing in the whole circus, even if he doesn't look like either of us. I kept my face neutral. What do you mean? He looks like her, Marcus said, staring out the window at the city that had made him rich. The sister, the one who went crazy, same eyes, same chin. Sometimes I look at him and I see her and I think about what we did, and then I pour another drink and I stop thinking. I poured him another drink. I kept the recorder running. I kept smiling. For 3 months I collected everything, the admissions, the doubts, the late-night confessions that he thought were private, because he was paying me $500 an hour to keep his secrets. I collected the emails where he discussed, containing the Iris situation with Celeste's attorney. I collected the financial records that showed the apartment they had promised me had never been more than a line item in a budget that was later reallocated. And I collected the journal. My journal. The one I had kept during the pregnancy, the one with the ultrasound photos, the one with the entry from the night Leo was born where I had written, in handwriting that still shook. They took him from my arms and I did not scream because I thought love meant letting them. I had everything I needed, but I needed the stage. And Celeste, generous in her narcissism, was about to give it to me. The network was honoring her. A special live broadcast, the season finale of Celeste, where she would receive the Pioneer of Transparent Motherhood Award for her groundbreaking honesty about fertility, surrogacy, and the modern family. It was going to be held at the Beacon Theater, broadcast to millions, sponsored by a diaper company and a life insurance conglomerate. The irony was so thick you could have choked on it. I made sure I was on the guest list. Marcus had invited me as part of his rehabilitation team, the experts who would vouch for his character in the divorce proceedings. I wore black, not the beige of my consultant uniform, but a tailored black dress that made me look like a shadow that had finally learned to take up space. The theater was a cathedral of lights and applause. Celeste was radiant in white, always white, the color of the innocent, the redeemed, the fake. She accepted her award with tears in her eyes, the same tears she had practiced in a mirror for 20 years. She talked about the journey. She talked about the sisterhood of motherhood. She talked about the village it takes to raise a child and the courage to ask for help. She did not mention that the village had been me and that she had burned it down. When she finished her speech, she opened the floor for questions. It was a staged moment, a chance for her to be spontaneous and charming. She pointed to the audience. Yes, the woman in black. I stood up. I didn't take a microphone from an usher. I had my own, small and powerful, connected to the audio system by a technician who owed Marcus money and who I had paid to owe me instead. My name is Iris, I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced this moment in 1,000 mirrors, in 1,000 sleepless nights, in 1,000 dreams where I finally spoke and the world finally listened. And I am the sister you asked for help. The sister you promised an apartment. The sister you promised a life. The sister who carried your child in her body because you told her it was family. The theater went silent. Celeste's smile froze. Marcus, in the front row, went pale. I am also, I continued, reaching into my bag, the woman who signed a document under duress, while drugged and exhausted, that was notarized by someone with an expired license. Which makes that document legally void. Which means I never surrendered my rights. I was simply told I had, by a family that needed me to disappear. I pulled out the journal. I opened it to the first page. This is my pregnancy journal, dated, documented, with medical records that show I was the gestational mother, with photos of me pregnant alone while you wore a prosthetic belly on national television. I looked at the screens behind the stage. The technician did his job. The ultrasound photos appeared. The journal entries appeared. Notary records appeared. And then, the video of Marcus, drunk and confessional, admitting that Leo looked like me, that he had always known the truth, that he had chosen silence because the show needed a happy ending. The audience made a sound I had never heard before. Not gasping, not booing, the sound of a narrative cracking open. The sound of a million people realizing they had been lied to. Celeste reached for the microphone. This is a sick woman, she said, her voice shaking. My sister has mental health issues. She's delusional, I'm not delusional, I said. I'm just no longer silent. You wanted transparent motherhood, Celeste. Here it is. The transparency of a woman who gave you her body and you gave her a gag order. The transparency of a father who knew the truth and chose ratings. The transparency of a family that sold a child on television and called it a miracle. I closed the journal. I'm not asking for custody tonight. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for my name. I'm asking for the 10 years you stole from me. And I'm asking every person in this room and every person watching to remember that when you call someone family, you don't rent them. You don't erase them. And you sure as hell don't perform their pain for commercial breaks. I walked up the aisle. The security guards didn't stop me. The audience didn't move. Behind me, I could hear Celeste's voice, high and desperate, trying to spin the moment into something she could control, but the narrative had already shifted. The sponsors were already pulling out. The network was already cutting to commercial. I walked out of the theater into the May night. I didn't have an apartment. I didn't have a fortune. I didn't have Leo, not yet, not legally, but I had my voice. I had my name. And for the first time in 10 years, I had the truth on my side. 3 weeks later, I received a direct message on social media. It was from an account with no photo, no bio, just a name. Leo, are you the lady from the video? He wrote, the one from my dad's hidden photo album. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands shook. I typed back, yes, I'm Iris, you look like me, he wrote. In the pictures, you look like me. I cried then. Not the controlled tears of a woman who had learned to survive. The real tears. The ones that come when a wound you thought was scar tissue turns out to still be capable of healing. Can we meet? He asked. Not for anything big. Just I want to see who you are, without the cameras. Without my mom telling me what to think. I agreed. We met at a park near the river on a Tuesday evening when the light was gold and the air smelled like summer. He was 10, and he had my eyes, and he was shy, and he was brave. And he was nothing like the prop he had been on television. We walked. We talked about his school, his friends, the dog he wanted but Celeste wouldn't allow because shedding doesn't fit the aesthetic. We didn't talk about the lawsuit that was now pending. We didn't talk about custody or rights or the future. We just watched the sunset. And when it was over, he hugged me. A small, quick hug, the kind that 10-year-old boys give when they're not sure if it's allowed. And he said, I'm glad you're real. I'm glad I'm real too. It took me 10 years to get here. 10 years of being a ghost, a womb, a cautionary tale, but I'm real, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm Iris. I'm 35 years old. And this isn't the end of my story. It's the first conversation. See you in the next story.